Clinton came on, and 8 years of Clinton-Gore were some of the worst years for the suppression of the health and safety regulatory agencies. The rhetoric was different, but Al Gore and Clinton accelerated the outsourcing of government. They were very militaristic. They didn't take advantage of the peace dividend, which is a huge lost opportunity after the demise of the Soviet Union, which would have meant redirecting military money into public works, and repairing America, creating jobs that couldn't be exported to China, and improving public facilities. And I saw the Food and Drug Administration, I saw OSHA, I saw EPA, I saw all these agencies being anesthetized. Now, in Washington, you support a lot of citizen groups. And when the political system is weakened by corporate predation and corporate usurpation and corporate co-optation, it then weakens the civic movement. And those are the two tracks for democracy, the civic movement and the political movement. One cannot achieve its goals properly without the other. You notice in the 19th century, there was the abolition movement, civic, there was the women's suffrage movement, civic, but they had analogous parties. They had the Liberty Party in 1840, they had the Women's Suffrage Party. The same happened with labor and farmer, and the Populist Party, the Greenback Party, the Labor Party in the late 19th century. They never won a national election, but it was much easier to get on the ballot in those days compared to now. Much, much, much easier. And as a result, they were able to put on the ground the social justice movements that the two major parties were not going to initiate. In other words, these small parties were tugboat parties. They pushed, they pulled, they were getting stronger, especially the Populist Party in the late 20th century. There was an interesting tolerance for those kinds of parties, even though the two majors knew they weren't going to ever win a national election. And aren't we glad that some voters decided that instead of seeing who was the least worst among the Whigs and the Democrats, that they voted for the Liberty Party or the Women's Suffrage Party? But somehow now, there's a gross political bigotry operating, a gross intolerance operating, so that we are prisoners of this 220-year-old two-party, winner-take-all electoral college duopoly. So much so that the liberal intelligentsia has turned against candidates who represent their agenda far more consistently than do the corporatized Democratic Party. And the liberal intelligentsia then decides to go for the least worst because the Republicans are so so distasteful to them. And what happens when you go for the least worst and you don't make demands on the least worst, say John Kerry and the anti-war movement? What happens is your vote is taken for granted, it has no leverage, they never look back, and they go further away from your position. Because in the tug-of-war of politics, the corporate interests never stop. And if we don't stop pulling them this way, whether it's the crookery on Wall Street and the abuse of investor rights, as my classmate Mike Robbins knows so well and analyzed so well, or whether it's the huge expansion of the militarization of foreign policy, and what that means to the rest of the world, and invading Iraq, and siding with the military approach to Israeli-Palestinian conflict instead of supporting the Israeli-Palestinian peace movements. We have a government that actually supports a policy that is in the minority opinion of both Jewish Americans and Arab Americans. AIPAC does not represent majority Jewish American opinion on this, which is for a two-state solution. So we see this everywhere, and what is